We have a few questions. Please do contribute your questions and I will get started. The first question is for Liu Yang. I had a chance to see, this is from Xiaojin Wu. I had a chance to see the exhibition at MIA. It was truly one of a kind. While I can see how the exhibition must have generated tremendous interest and helped activate MIA's Chinese collection, I was wondering what impact the exhibition had after it came off view. Did it change the ways the collection is presented in the collection gallery, for example?
Well, it was, as I mentioned, that as also you see through the pictures and the video clips, that it's experimental. It doesn't mean that all show should follow the suit. And also it was a quite expensive show. That but indeed that inspired all of us, all the curators, to think about alternative way while installing show, whether it's small or it's a major exhibition. So, for instance, during our discussions of various topics, various installations, we often refer to that installation that I worked with Robert Wilson. So I think that the impact is huge, and although that not it's not easy to do the same show all the time. So, but impact was huge to everyone, to the mentality of all my colleagues, as well as myself. Since joining the museum world in 1997, so I have worked and realized more than a dozen of shows, over 10 accompanied by catalogs. I have done various shows. I mean, installation that quite traditional way of showing. But this is also really a challenge, a kind of eye-opening experience for myself. So I have learned a lot from Robert Wilson, from working with him. So yes, the impact was huge.
Thank you. And our yesterday's presenter, Dr. Noelle Giuffrida, has a question for you as well, Dr. Liu. She says, the MIA exhibition was very theatrical. Many rooms seem to almost operate as separate time-based multimedia and multisensory experiences. How did you and the exhibition designers manage visitor traffic and maintain isolation of the sound and smellscapes for the different spaces?
Well, it's hard to create kind of a separate room that you can't hear, can't disrupting soundscape, because many rooms there's no closing door, so it's very hard to do that. So the only way to minimize that is to have the soundscape played quite, the volume keep very low. So as I mentioned earlier, that what missing for this installation was the didactics and the labels, except the very brief introductory panel at the beginning of the show. However, we have created a brochure, as I showed you on the 2 slides, that gives general idea, and I kind of navigate for visitors to each room. That gives a brief idea of the thing that each room presents, and also the highlights of some objects in that room. I think all this helps to navigate a visitor to go through.
Thank you. We have a question from Chen. This is a question for Dr. Shen Chen. Thank you so much for the inspiring talk. My question is, do you think exhibiting Chinese art in a simulated original context and setting, like the 2014 ROM exhibition, is still preferred by curators and institutions? And here maybe we can have all three of you answer this question. Do you think recontextualization is a good way to bring the image of China and Chinese-ness to the Western audience? So first we have Dr. Shen answer, and then if other presenters want to chime in, that would be great.
Yes, that's a very good question, and it's certainly a big question. And I think my straightforward answer is there's no one way or the other answers. So it's not that say we are no longer promoted our traditional context, reconstruction of a historical context, like traditional exhibitions in the Forbidden City, or we do completely to the other ends of decontextualized exhibitions with the objects from the past. No, I think that this is the challenge. This is a challenge for our old curators of the museum in a changing world. So how to blend them together? You need to have to moving forward thinking, but you also have the roots in the tradition. So it is always on a case-by-case scenario, which your purpose of your exhibition or art installation at the time for your audience. So this exactly, allowed us to think about from audience side of it. So when you are, what's purpose? So it's the same thing or same topic or same group of artifacts can do one way or the other. And the best way you can do something together. So I'll leave the time to other to come on that.
Dr. Sao, do you have a comment on this theme of contextualization?
Yes, thank you. I also like to add like a penny of my thought into that. I think what Dr. Shen Chen mentioned, also the questions he proposed in his lectures are very thought-provoking, and it actually is those questions are constantly, as a curator of Chinese art or Asian art, I think we keep thinking all the time, in our everyday practice. For me, I think in my 10 years of as a curator here, I am actually the only Chinese curator in this in whole Australia in the state institutions or museums and galleries. So it becoming a trend is very generalized. The title. Most of my colleagues right now are called curator of Asian art. So it looks like that geographically, like a defined title is diminishing in Australia. So it is also probably, a trend, for becoming, and also in Australia, more and more Asian exhibitions is both a mix of historical art and contemporary art. So for me, I think, when the uniqueness and or sometimes you can call it the stereotype of Chinese art, we can never diminish, like people are sort of expecting to see those symbols, the dragons, the phoenix, and all that. So, but how, as Dr. Shen Chen just said, how we put it in context, that's quite important. But I always, also maybe because I was trained as an archaeologist, so whenever we do, whenever I do my exhibition, I always think about this sort of a continuity to give it the historical context, and of course, in a current situation, it's the contemporary relevance of our show. All these, elements. I'm trying to weave into an exhibition so that the viewers can have a a broad sense in a contextual approach, when they see the show. So that is my penny of thought. Thank you.
Thank you. How about you, Dr. Liu?
I think that when you look at a visit installation, you would have to look at that much bigger picture rather than just to focus on one small detail like a dragon or so. For instance, this show is really a visitor's experience is really completed with us. All different mediums, like sights, sounds, colors, special lightings, and smells, and it's beside the freshness, excitement, exhibition like that, the installation is really hope that it will also inspire people to think, for instance, how curators approach exhibition, how old things can be made to see new, what audience expect when they go to a museum and what they receive. Of course, the risks both museum and audience are willing to take. So and by the way, that if I can, just wanted to address two small details that is Dr. Shen mentioned the dragon image painted on the wall of the room. When I saw that image, I was also a little bit concerned about whether it's exaggerated, or then I realized, then I compared with the some images on the Chinese works of art. For instance, Imperial made lacquerware with 9 dragons. Some dragons depicted in those works are even more fearsome than this, presented. It's actually quite truthful to these images that created by the imperial court. Thank you.
Thank you for just bringing this up. And certainly, as I said in the beginning, I have no intention to put you on the spot. And it was just a very convenience that the images that I always talk about, because as I said, in the talk, that I really enjoy, and I feel that I'm committed to tell the students of Western, University, of my students, about the drug, what the literary meaning or transformation of the meaning of a Chinese dragon in the history. So that's why I caught you on the spot. But the point is, as we are looking forward, we may want to bring up a more positive, a changing view of our Chinese elements in our various endeavor. Just not saying that we should not do, oh, this is wrong. This is not wrong. Dr. Liu, you did a wonderful, very inspiring show. These are just small elements I'm talking about in this way. So our whole point, in my presentation, is how we are moving forward and in the changing world, that we can bring things up and not always focus on what conventionally the Western world thinking of China.
I agree with you. However, if the show is about dragon, that's a different story, right? If the dragon is only one small element of the big story, then you are not able to avoid that kind of inclusion of that, right? Because it's the fundamental, very important element of Chinese culture, particularly correct, the culture related to the imperial house.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I guess I also had a question about the designer, if I can insert, because I feel it's a little bit relevant with this idea, question about whether this scream and this dragon, fierce dragon, enforce stereotype of Oriental despot or the foot binding, the women, you know, has another. And then, so I just wanted to ask more about the background of this designer who put his, Wilson, who put his name like very big over all of the PR, it seems, for the exhibition. So I wonder, is this as much an exhibition about his design work, you know, as much as about Qing Dynasty?
Well, due to the limits of time, I wasn't able to share with you my experience, you know, working with Robert Wilson, the process of creating this installation. So it all started with my contact with him, because I always want to do something new, something innovative. After curated more than a dozen of shows in my more than 20 years career as a curator. So I, of course, I've been doing, you know, various things that some other curators would have done, something like, you know, juxtaposition, intervention, remix. So those are the terms to describe those kind of so-called innovative way of displaying works in the gallery. But for, you know, to work something large and big with someone who's very innovative, that was also new to me. So my idea was that based on our wonderful collection of works from the Qing period, as I mentioned, that was a major part of our collection of Chinese art, over 2,000 pieces. Some were really made by the imperial workshops. So I know him, I know his works, so I reached out to him to you know, to invite him to work with me to create this interesting show. So he accepted the invitation, and I went to, he has a complex in Long Island where he used to train many his students and followers from all over the world. So just 1 year prior to the opening of that show, I went to there with our deputy director, Matthew Welch, and also exhibition designer, Michael. So with us, I have, with the story I have already created. So I have created chapters of the stories, and armed with hundreds of images, all the ideas, how to, you know, the reason that we had 10 rooms was that because this major exhibition space, some areas really, there are constructional, you know, burden. You cannot open it as much bigger, so you have to divide them. So we went to Watermill. That's the place he had this complex, and spent a week with him to discuss the concept, the stories. Then he kind of created this kind of a draft of a floor plan. And I actually quite admire his ability to grasp the story or the concept that I created in a very quick way. You know, he is, although he is a collector, also interested in Chinese art and interested in Chinese philosophy and so on. But he's American, and he could not speak Chinese. So I actually quite admire his capability of grasping the idea that we created. So that, yes.
Certainly very notable collaboration. So I want to give time for another question for Dr. Ian Tsao. So this is a question from Yun Wang. And Yunwang writes, the way we eat demonstrates an engaged way to umbrella and present Chinese ceramics in an interconnected way, involving visitors to understand Chinese ceramic culture related to their current life. Unlike blue and white, enamel, and cloisonne, which are painted colorfully and some fired as export merchandise, and probably easier for Western viewers to be attracted to and fall in love with, yet monoglazed, monochrome ceramics may be hard to be highlighted for significance of their form, shape, and monotone glaze, but they are very crucial aesthetic perspectives to understand Chinese ceramics and culture. Have you confronted any kind of a challenge maybe to present their importance or uniqueness to your Western audience? Are there any compromises at the cost of leaving out aesthetic values of artworks that Chinese audience mutually share?
Thank you for the question, Yunwang. You're right, actually. We're actually lucky because we're art gallery, and then so people's expectation, is about color and shapes and compositions around art. So it's not that difficult to promote, monochrome, and also because we in our collection, ceramic collection, we have quite diverse monochrome wares. So when I organized the exhibition as one part of the conversation of Asian art collections, I put out like a series of monochrome ceramics to historical, like the red glaze and celadons to go put next to Liu Jianhua's the container series, because that's in that his series, it's two color themes. It's celadon and the Lang Hong Yu. So then the second one, it's show is in the way we eat. I use the other monochrome like altar pieces, because but it's not just like presenting them just for their color, but also I gave them put them in a culture context, like they in the theme of the like offerings, food, part of the has religious meanings. So I think it's more it's all about the context, like you present works in a culture, historical, and religious context. That's quite important. I think people are quite appreciating that kind of approach. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And we are gonna, with your permission, because our schedule started 10 minutes late, we're gonna go until 40. We're gonna go for another 8 minutes. Is that okay with our panelists? Thank you. So hang in there, everyone. We're almost. Next question is from Christina Yu. She writes, Mia is a model of engaging community voices in American museums. Can Dr. Liu elaborate on his experience of working with local communities? For Dr. Cao and Dr. Shen, what is the practice in Australia and Canada?
Thank you, Christina Yu. Thank you for the great questions. Yes, the community is always the center of our museum. So particularly, in these 2 years that this became a key issue of the museum to face. We actually just created a position, a new position with the endowment that donated by several donors, local donors, in Curation and Equity chief officer that will coordinate, particularly our connecting the local, the people around the Mir and in the city or afar. So we have talked about, a possibility to invite community to discuss content of possible exhibitions and label writings, didactics. So this is all on our agenda, and it's a very important issue to me. So as you can see from the every 5 years we create this strategic plan. This community reaching is always center of this strategic plan every 5 years. Thank you.
Great. Other panelists?
Yes, I just want to add a little bit about the Australian approach of the community voices. We actually, at the gallery, we have a group of ethnic diverse, ambassadors. We call them community ambassadors. They offer tours in Japanese, Korean, and Chinese, like Mandarin and Cantonese. So they are the sort of providing a different, foreign, other than English, tours of both the permanent collections and also the temporary exhibitions. The very energetic group, very dedicated docents, as you call in America. And also the gallery has a Aboriginal advisory board. So it is quite important, I think, to show the gallery's engagement of the Aboriginal people here. And also in terms of a broader Chinese engagement, the gallery's Chinese actually language website and the official website is the only foreign language information we provide in the official website. And we are about to launch our WeChat and Weibo service very soon, probably the end of this month. So that's actually because Australia is such a multicultural society, and I think the galleries has recognized that, and also is doing all the best, to cater the different, language, different ethnic groups and the communities as well. The needs. Thank you.
Can I just correct what I said? I'm not sure I had said it correctly. So the new position Mia just created is entitled Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. So our museum, under leadership of Director Katie Ruber, have just announced that a few days ago, actually, the major endowment created two positions, and one is this Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. Then the second is a curator and Latin American arts, and so it's a great news to the museum. We received $19 million in endowment from various donors recently. And the third part will be help to assist the Chinese art and the Southeast Asian arts conservation, programming, and research and publication, and also assist the salary of the deputy director. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a comment for Dr. Chen's talk from our yesterday's panelist, Dr. Mamie Rado. She says, thank you very much for your thought-provoking points. And she wants to respond to the way you characterize the Met's exhibition about Chinese clothing, Chinese textile. And she says that exhibition also wanted to showcase multiple interpretations of one motif across time and space. And so she emphasizes that the exhibition was not about presenting just one reality of Chinese history. And she talked about opium, and regarding the Mao suit, She says the suffering in China is one thing. The symbol of utopianism in French 1968 student movement is another reality. Hong Kong-born artist Sung Kwang Chi-Huo lived in the States and never experienced a cultural revolution firsthand, and also adopted the Mao suit as his uniform. As for Bound Feet, historian Dorothy Ko has done a lot of work to show that gentry women in the past indeed celebrated it as a symbol of virtue and women's work. The idea of bound feet as suffering and Chinese backwardness was indebted to the 20th century male elite's view of adopting a Western view of China. I don't know if you have any reply to that, or.
Well, I guess these are comments, not questions, but just for clarification. But thank you very much, Mei. I really appreciate your comment. No, actually, I just raised a question. I understand it's just more reflection, exactly what Dr. Liu and I was discussing earlier. This is just the elements of the exhibition, doesn't really just credit the whole beautiful exhibition at all. So I have to really put on the front, but clear to say that. But you do make me thinking though, and along with other questions in the line, is that regardless how we as a curator thinking we are doing, it is really a way what we are doing, what we are communicating with our audience, how they receive it, what they are seeing. I do see another comment talking about the 3D paintings instead of this another column. That exactly the same answer to that is whether it's becoming decorating a column or is a 3D, landscaping. It is really about how we, in doing the art exhibitions, how we see the audience going to receive that. When you have the audience receive the images and it's seen in the publication, what it gets into there, if this is the images that I as a curator has been receiving, how you can blend on the audience that they have received the same very negative or other versions of that image. So I think this is a question should be for all of us. It's not the critics that what we should do or not we should not do, or what we do wrong, nothing, we have done nothing right at all. It's just how we want our audience to receive it. And this back to the questions you asked earlier is how we engage to the public. And I think to engage public, it's not just go out to ask, what do you want to do? What do you want to see? It's really we can get to first feel that how to communicate with the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. So our time is up. Let's see, Jiyan, maybe you can ask your question in the panelists and students meeting after this, but there is just one more question from anonymous attendee that I will ask, and then we can wrap up. So it is, oh, actually there were two questions by anonymous, but anyway, I'll ask the first one. This is for everyone, so it's a good way to close. It says, if curators want to change the Western view of Chinese, is the goal to change the views of overseas Chinese or include the Chinese mainland? Since 2000, many Chinese art exhibitions in the West have been focused on some well-known Chinese artists, and hardly to see that included, there's hardly a chance to see those those same maybe representative artists contemporary artists in mainland China. Do you think this can change the Chinese image as a whole? Do you think it can be changed? How to change? I'm a little unclear. There's so many sides here, but maybe you can each address this in your own way. Maybe it talks about the difference between the type of exhibitions that people can see in China versus the type of exhibitions we see in other countries in the West, and like what audiences they have.
Maybe I can start from my interpretation of this question. I know, yes, I agree with you, the question a little bit more multifaceted, but I just take it from one point that about voicing that I, talk about it. My thought is understanding, changing images of China doesn't really mean that we need native Chinese or native Chinese artists to do the job, because this is not about color of the people to voice or voice for, voice by. It is a way of communication about how the voice, intertwine together. Some, people, people of the white or people of the non-yellow, they also can be understand very deeply about the roots and tradition of China, and knowing where the China goes forward doesn't really exclude it to one ethnic group or not. So I think very is welcome is to have the dialogue like this, to intertwine the voice from different background that brings to the change.
Great. Other respondents?
To me, that there's always different way to approach. Depending on different topics and different type of shows. For the historical materials, you can do experiment way like I did with Robert Wilson, but you can also present it in a more traditional way, like the Terracotta Warrior show that I did in the past. But in the meantime, curators would also approach Chinese art with the contemporary materials. Take myself as example, I have established a series of ink painting exhibition, started with a contemporary ink painter, his name is Liu Dan. It's very interesting approach. Just give one example that he came to a museum 6 months prior to the opening, and I showed him the Western oil painting galleries. So he selected a figurative painting, oil painting, 17th century, but Dutch painting, and converted that into a landscape, a Chinese traditional landscape with the ink. So you can barely see some figurative contour. Then in the meantime, it's also a very convincing Chinese landscape. So I think that kind of interplay or interaction of Chinese art and Western art is very interesting. So that would be a different way to approach.
You and Dr. Cao, go ahead.
Yeah, yes, of course, we would like to include as many, Chinese artists, both inland and overseas as possible. But we, as a museum or galleries, we all have budget issues. That's very practical. And very we have to consider. And but we do the best we could. And because, for example, in the Way We Eat show, I've included the very popular Chinese new literati artist called Lao Shu, and also Li Jing's work, because they are quite popular in mainland China. And also I'd like to introduce some new works in it to compare. They are displayed next to traditional ink art like Wu Changshuo and Wang Geyi and Cui Zifan's work. So I think it's what Dr. Liu Yang was saying, like that kind of engaging with the contemporary Chinese artist. It is important to present a more comprehensive view of Chinese art, both historical and contemporary. Right. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes our panel. Many interesting issues that we will continue to think about. Thank you so much to all our panelists. And now I see the floor to Kathy.
Thank you very much for this very rich panel. The presentation, the curation, the recognizing, and the revisiting of these cultures is such a big job for all of you. And thank you for sharing your experiences with this.